The day was slow and heavy, the kind where everything feels louder than usual. The honking of cars, the chatter of strangers, and the shuffle of people moving in every direction. It was late afternoon at the city bus terminal. The air smelled like rain and exhaust, a mix that always lingered there no matter what time of day. People were lined up at the ticket counter, some checking their phones, others impatiently tapping their feet. Among them stood a young man in his mid-20s, wearing a plain shirt, jeans, and a tired look on his face. He had a small bag slung over his shoulder, holding a few groceries and a book he had been reading during lunch break. He wasn't anyone special, just another person trying to get home after a long shift at work. His mind was busy thinking about the day, how his boss had been short-tempered, how he was running low on money until next week's paycheck, and how much he wished to just sit quietly on the bus ride home. The line moved slowly, but he didn't mind. Waiting was part of life in that terminal. Ahead of him stood an elderly man, thin and bent slightly forward, his clothes worn but neat. He had a small paper bag in one hand and a few coins in the other. The young man noticed him because he looked nervous, as if worried about something. The old man reached the counter and asked softly for a ticket. The cashier told him the price, and he began counting his coins one by one. The line behind them grew longer, and a few people started murmuring under their breath. "Come on, old man," someone whispered irritably. The old man's hands trembled as he counted. He had a few coins missing. He checked his pockets, then the small bag, but there was nothing more. His voice cracked when he spoke, apologizing to the cashier, saying he must have dropped some money earlier. The cashier looked impatient. "Sir, please step aside if you don't have enough," she said politely but firmly. The old man nodded sadly, trying to move aside, embarrassed. The young man had been watching quietly. Something about the old man's shaky hands reminded him of his grandfather, how he used to struggle with simple things in his last years but always smiled through it. Without thinking much, the young man stepped forward and said gently, "It's okay, I'll cover his ticket." The old man turned around, surprised. "No, son, you don't need to," he began. But the young man smiled and handed a small note to the cashier. "Please give him his ticket," he said softly. The cashier took the money and printed 2 tickets, one for the old man, one for him. The old man's eyes glistened. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice trembling. The young man shook his head. "It's fine, sir, don't worry about it, I'm happy to help." The old man tried to thank him again, but words failed. He just placed a gentle hand on the young man's arm for a moment and whispered, "Bless you." Then he slowly made his way toward the waiting area. The young man smiled faintly and stepped aside to wait for his bus. It wasn't a big deal in his mind, just something anyone should do. He had been helped by strangers before, and now it was his turn. He didn't know that his small gesture had caught more than a few eyes. Not far from the ticket counter, a few people were filming. Hidden among the crowd were small cameras placed by a local community show that recorded real-life moments of kindness. They were running a social experiment to see how people reacted when someone around them needed help. The young man had no idea that his simple act had just become the highlight of their day. The old man sat on a bench nearby, clutching his ticket tightly. Every now and then, he looked at the young man with quiet gratitude. For him, that small gesture meant a lot more than the price of a bus ticket. He had been having a hard week. His pension was delayed, and he had spent most of his savings on medicine for his daughter. When he realized he didn't have enough money for the ride, he had almost decided to walk the long road home. That young man's help came at the perfect moment. The young man leaned against a pillar, scrolling through his phone, unaware of the eyes on him. He wasn't thinking about what he had done. He was just glad the line was moving faster now, and that the old man was taken care of. In his mind, it was just a normal day. When the bus finally arrived, the crowd started moving forward. The old man walked slowly toward the door, and the young man followed behind. The old man turned once more and smiled at him before climbing aboard. The young man smiled back and took a seat a few rows behind him. The rain had started by then, soft drops hitting the window as the bus began to roll out of the terminal. The streets outside were crowded with people holding umbrellas, lights reflecting on the wet pavement. The young man put on his earphones and looked outside, watching the city blur by. He felt calm. He didn't realize that somewhere behind those blurred buildings a small group of camera operators and producers were talking about him, replaying the moment on their screens. In their small van parked near the terminal, the crew was quiet for a while as they watched the footage. The director leaned forward and said, "That's the one. That's real kindness. No hesitation, no looking around to see who's watching." The cameraman nodded. He didn't even wait to be thanked properly. He just did it. They all agreed that they had captured something special, something genuine. So many people had ignored the old man before that moment. Some had even turned away to avoid eye contact. But one young stranger had stepped forward without expecting anything in return. It was a simple act, yet it carried weight. They decided to use that clip as one of the main highlights in their upcoming feature. Back on the bus, the young man didn't notice any of this. The old man had dozed off in his seat, his ticket still clutched tightly in his hand. The ride was quiet, except for the sound of the rain and the gentle rumble of the engine. For the young man, it was just another evening heading home, unaware that this one small moment of kindness would soon travel farther than he could ever imagine. As the bus slowed at his stop, he stood up, careful not to wake the old man, and stepped out into the damp air. The streets glistened under the streetlights. He walked home with slow steps, his shoes splashing in shallow puddles. By the time he reached his small apartment, he had already forgotten about the incident. He put away his groceries, changed clothes, and sat by the window with a cup of tea. The sound of the rain filled the silence, peaceful and steady. Somewhere out there, his quiet act was being replayed again and again by a group of strangers who couldn't stop smiling at what they had witnessed. But for him, it was just another ordinary day, one where he did what felt right, without realizing that cameras had been rolling, capturing a story that would soon touch thousands of hearts. The next morning started like any other. The city was already alive with noise, horns blaring, shopkeepers unlocking doors, and children rushing to school. The young man woke up early, stretched, and prepared for work. He didn't think about the old man or the bus terminal. It had been just a small thing, a passing moment of kindness that didn't feel worth remembering. He grabbed his bag, locked his door, and began walking to the bus stop. The air was cool, carrying the smell of fresh rain from the night before. He stopped at a roadside stall for his usual cup of tea. The vendor greeted him with a smile and handed over a steaming glass. "You look tired," the vendor said. The young man chuckled softly. It's been a long week. He didn't know that somewhere else people were watching him again, but this time, not through hidden cameras. They were watching him on a screen. Inside a small office across town, a group of people sat around a large monitor. The same crew who had filmed him the day before was now reviewing the footage. Their faces lit up as the video played, the old man's shaking hands, the young man stepping forward, the words, "It's okay, sir. Take care." It was all there, simple, genuine, and powerful. One of the editors leaned back and said, "We didn't even need to stage this. This is the real thing." The director nodded. "That's why it works. People can feel when something is real. Look at his face. No acting, no hesitation. That's what makes it special." They watched the clip again, zooming in on small moments. The young man reaching into his pocket, the old man's expression of relief, the quiet smile they shared before parting ways. It was ordinary, but somehow extraordinary at the same time. They decided to edit the clip for their upcoming show, which focused on acts of kindness captured across the city. The plan was to release it online first, to see how people responded. They added a soft background tune and a short message at the end. Kindness costs nothing, but means everything. As they finalized the video, the director wondered about the young man. "Do we have his name?" she asked. The assistant shook her head. "He left right after paying. No interview, no details. He probably doesn't even know we filmed him." The director smiled thoughtfully. Maybe that's what makes it even better. By evening, the edited video was ready. They uploaded it to their social media page with a simple caption, "A small act, a big heart." Watch what happened when one young man stepped up for a stranger. Within an hour, the video started gaining attention. Likes, shares, and comments began to flood in. People were touched by what they saw. The scene wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. It reminded viewers that compassion still existed in a world that often felt cold and busy. Meanwhile, the young man's day went on quietly. He finished his shift at work, caught the bus home, and spent the evening helping his younger brother with homework. He didn't check social media often, and he certainly had no idea that his face was being shared online by thousands of people. Somewhere out there, strangers were calling him the kind guy from the bus stop. By midnight, the video had crossed 100,000 views. Comments kept pouring in. "I wish more people were like him. This made me cry. Such a simple act, but so beautiful. The world needs kindness like this." The next morning, news channels started to notice. A few pages reposted the video, and it began trending with the title, "Young Man's Act of Kindness Restores Faith in Humanity." Reporters tried to find out who he was, but no one seemed to know. The production team decided to wait a few days before revealing any details, hoping the mystery would add to the story's charm. At the same time, the old man who had been helped saw the video too. His neighbor had shown it to him, saying, "Isn't this you?" The old man watched in silence, tears welling up in his eyes as he replayed the moment. It felt surreal to see himself on a screen, that small act being celebrated by so many. He whispered softly. He didn't even know he was being filmed, and he still helped. He wanted to find the young man and thank him again, not for the money, but for what the act had meant to him. That day at the terminal had been one of his hardest. He had been on his way to the hospital to visit his daughter, who had been sick for weeks. His wallet had been nearly empty, and when he realized he didn't have enough for the bus fare, his heart sank. He remembered thinking how embarrassing it was to be old and helpless in front of strangers. But then out of nowhere, that young man had stepped up without judgment. To the old man, it wasn't just kindness, it was dignity restored. Days passed and the video kept spreading. People began calling it the bus stop blessing. News websites wrote short articles about it. Teachers shared it in classrooms. Parents showed it to their children. Everyone loved how natural it felt, how it reminded them of the good in people. Meanwhile, the production team debated whether to contact the young man. They had his image but no name or phone number. They decided to reach out through social media, posting a message. "If you know this man from our kindness video, please contact us. We'd love to meet him." The post went viral too. Friends of the young man started recognizing him from the clip. One of his co-workers sent him the link that afternoon. When he opened it, he stared at the screen, stunned. It was him, standing at the counter, handing money to the cashier, smiling at the old man. For a long moment, he didn't know how to react. He replayed it again and again, feeling both awkward and amazed. He hadn't thought that small gesture meant much. To see it turned into a story that touched thousands made him feel both proud and uneasy. He wasn't used to attention. He messaged his coworker. "I didn't even know anyone was filming." The coworker replied, "You're famous now, man. Look at the comments. People love what you did." He scrolled through the comments, feeling a mix of emotions. Some people were calling him a hero. Others said they hoped more people would act like him. But for him, it wasn't about being seen. It was just something that felt right in that moment. Later that night, the production team reached out to him through a message. They explained that it had been part of a hidden camera project on kindness, and they wanted to thank him personally. At first, he wasn't sure if he should respond. He didn't like the idea of being in the spotlight. But then he thought of the old man and how much that small moment had meant. He agreed to meet them the next day. The following morning, he arrived at their office, unsure of what to expect. The team greeted him warmly, shaking his hand and thanking him for what he'd done. They showed him the edited video on a large screen. Watching it in that setting, with everyone's eyes on him, made him a bit embarrassed. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said shyly. The director smiled and replied, "That's exactly why it's special. You did it when no one was watching." They told him how the video had gone viral, how people were inspired to do kind things because of him. They even mentioned that donations had started coming in to help senior citizens in the city. Hearing that made him pause. He hadn't realized something so small could ripple out like that. Before leaving, he asked if they knew how to contact the old man. The director smiled. "We're working on it," she said. He saw the video too. He wants to meet you." As he left the office, the young man walked through the busy street, his thoughts full. Cars rushed by, people moved quickly, everyone caught up in their own world. But for him, something had changed. He had always believed that kindness mattered, but now he could see how it could travel far beyond a single moment. He didn't know it yet, but that reunion with the old man was closer than he thought, and it would become the most emotional part of his story. By the time a week had passed, the video had become one of the most shared clips on social media. Everywhere people were talking about the young man who helped the old stranger at the bus terminal. It had crossed millions of views, and news channels started to play it in their feel-good segments. For most viewers, it was just a short, touching story about kindness. But for the young man, it was still hard to believe that a moment so small had turned into something so big. He tried to go on with his usual life. Every morning he took the same route to work, sat at the same desk, and shared jokes with his coworkers during lunch. But something had changed around him. People now looked at him differently. Some smiled knowingly, others gave him nods of respect. A few even came up to him to say they saw the video and were inspired by it. One afternoon, as he was leaving the office, a stranger approached him near the bus stop. "You're the guy from the video, right?" The man asked excitedly. "That was beautiful, brother. The world needs more people like you." The young man felt shy and just smiled, replying, "Thank you, but really, it was nothing special." He wasn't comfortable being treated like a celebrity for something he felt anyone should do. Still, it warmed his heart to see people reacting with kindness. That night, as he scrolled through his phone, he came across more posts about the video. There were reaction clips, short edits with emotional music, and even drawings people had made of the moment. One message caught his eye. It was from the production team telling him they had found the old man and were planning a reunion. They asked if he would be willing to meet him again on camera this time. Without hesitation, he agreed. He didn't care about the cameras. He just wanted to see the old man again. A few days later, the team arranged everything. The young man was asked to come to a small park near the old man's home. When he arrived, he saw the familiar faces of the production crew setting up their equipment. They greeted him warmly. "He's on his way," one of them said with a smile. "He's very excited to meet you." While they waited, the young man sat on a bench feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. He wondered how the old man had been. Was he okay? Had things improved for him? A few minutes later, he saw him, walking slowly with a cane, wearing the same worn coat but with a wide, genuine smile. The old man's eyes brightened the moment he saw him. The young man stood up and walked over quickly. They met halfway, and the old man immediately held his hand. "I finally get to thank you properly," the old man said, his voice trembling but full of joy. "You helped me more than you know." The young man smiled softly. "I just paid for your ticket, sir." "That's all." The old man shook his head. "No, son. It wasn't just about money. That day I was losing hope. I felt invisible. But your kindness reminded me that good people still exist. I'll never forget that." They both sat down together, and the cameras began to roll quietly in the background. The old man told him about his life, how he had worked all his years as a carpenter, how life had slowed down after retirement, and how he had been visiting his sick daughter that day when the incident happened. "She's getting better now," he said with a grateful smile. "She even saw the video and cried. She said you gave her father his dignity back." The young man listened silently, touched by every word. He hadn't realized how deep the impact had been. For him, it was just a small gesture, but for the old man, it had been a turning point. Sometimes people didn't need big help. They just needed to feel seen and cared for. The crew captured their conversation but kept their distance, allowing the two men to talk freely. It wasn't about filming anymore. It was about two strangers who had shared a moment that changed both their lives. They laughed, shared stories, and even made plans to meet again. Before leaving, the old man said something that stayed with the young man for a long time. "Kindness is like planting seeds. You may not see all the flowers, but they'll grow somewhere someday." After the meeting, the team told the young man they wanted to include the reunion in the documentary. They asked if he was okay with it. He nodded. "As long as it inspires people to do something kind for someone else," he said. The director smiled. "That's exactly what it's doing already." When the reunion video was released, it became even more popular than the first one. Viewers couldn't get enough of the heartfelt moment when the two men met again. Many people said it made them cry. Others commented that they had gone out and helped someone that very day because of it. The young man started receiving hundreds of messages from strangers thanking him for reminding them to be better. One evening, while walking home from work, he noticed something that made him smile. Near the same bus terminal where everything had started, a small group of people had set up a donation box labeled Kindness Corner. They were collecting money to help travelers who couldn't afford bus fares. The young man stood there, quietly for a few minutes, watching others drop coins and notes into the box. No one knew it was him who had started this chain reaction, and that was just how he liked it. He didn't want fame or recognition. He just wanted the message to keep spreading. That night, as he walked back home, he felt a calm sense of happiness. He thought about how strange life could be, how one small moment could ripple into something far greater than you ever expected. Over the next few weeks, more stories began to appear online about people helping strangers at bus stations, train stops, and grocery stores. It was as if the kindness had sparked something in others. The young man read those stories quietly, feeling proud, but also humble. He never commented or told anyone who he was. He just smiled and kept going with his normal life. Meanwhile, the old man stayed in touch. They would meet sometimes for tea or lunch, talking about life, family, and the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. The old man would often joke, "Now you're a celebrity," and the young man would laugh and reply, "Only in videos, sir. In real life, I'm just me." The young man's family was proud of him too, though he kept reminding them that what he did wasn't anything extraordinary. Anyone would have done the same, he'd say. But deep down, he realized not everyone would. It made him want to keep doing good quietly, without needing anyone to see. One evening, while he was out buying groceries, he noticed a young woman struggling to pay for her items at the counter. The total was slightly more than what she had, and she looked embarrassed as she tried to remove a few things from her basket. The cashier looked uncomfortable. Without thinking, the young man stepped forward and said gently, "It's okay, I'll cover it." The woman looked surprised and said, "Thank you, but you don't have to." He just smiled, repeating the same words he had said weeks ago. "It's fine. Take care." When he walked out of the store, he couldn't help but chuckle. There were no cameras this time, no one watching or filming. It was just another small act, another seed planted. Maybe that was the real reward, not the fame, not the attention, but the chance to keep spreading quiet goodness wherever he went. The night sky above him was full of stars, and the city lights flickered below. Somewhere in those streets, someone else was probably watching his video and feeling inspired to do something kind. The thought made him smile. Kindness had become a habit, and in that simple way, his life had changed forever. The young man never thought that a single act of kindness would open so many doors in his life. The weeks that followed the reunion with the old man felt different. Every day brought something new. Messages from people he had never met. Strangers, thanking him for reminding them that kindness still existed. And even invitations from small community groups who wanted him to speak about what had happened. At first he was hesitant. He wasn't a speaker, and he didn't want people to think he was doing this for attention. But after talking to the old man, who encouraged him by saying, "If your story helps even one person be kind, then it's worth sharing," he agreed to attend a small event at a local school. That morning, he stood in front of a room full of students, nervous but calm. The teachers had shown the video earlier, and the children looked at him with wide eyes. He spoke slowly, from the heart. "I didn't plan anything special," he said. "I just saw someone who needed help, and I did what anyone should do. Kindness isn't about big gestures. It's about small ones that come from the heart." The children clapped softly, and one little boy raised his hand and asked, "Would you help him again if there were no cameras?" The young man smiled and replied, "Of course, the cameras don't matter. The person does." After that day, he went back to his normal life, but something inside him had changed. He began noticing things he hadn't before: an old woman struggling to cross the road, a man carrying heavy boxes, a child crying in the market. And every time, without thinking twice, he helped. Not because he wanted to be filmed again, but because he had realized how good it felt to simply care. One evening, while walking home, he stopped by a small tea stall near the same bus terminal where everything had started. The owner recognized him and smiled warmly. "You're the kind guy from the video, right?" he said. The young man laughed softly. "I guess so." The owner poured him a cup of tea and said, "That video changed a lot of things around here. People started paying for each other's tickets, helping strangers. It's different now." The young man looked around and noticed the difference himself. The air felt lighter, warmer. He saw small acts of kindness everywhere, as if people had been reminded of something they had forgotten. Meanwhile, the old man's life had taken a turn for the better, too. The story had brought attention to his struggles, and several people had reached out to help. His daughter had recovered well, and they were now living together in a small but comfortable home. He had even started volunteering at a community center, helping other elderly people who needed guidance. Sometimes he would tell them about the young man who had helped him at the bus terminal, describing the moment with pride. "He didn't know who I was," he would say, "but he saw me, and that's what mattered." One afternoon, the old man invited the young man over for tea. When he arrived, the house was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and tea leaves. The old man's daughter greeted him with a smile, saying, "You're the one who made my father believe in people again." The young man felt shy and said, "I didn't do much. He would have done the same for me." They sat together at the small dining table, talking for hours about life, family, and how small acts can create big changes. As they talked, the old man shared something touching. "Do you know," he said softly, "that after the video went viral, someone paid for my medical bills anonymously. I still don't know who it was, but I like to think it was inspired by what you did." The young man listened quietly, humbled. He hadn't realized that the ripple of kindness had spread that far. After that meeting, their bond grew stronger. They met often, sometimes just to talk about everyday things. The old man had become like family to him. He gave advice, told stories from his youth, and shared lessons about patience and gratitude. "Life isn't measured by what we get," he would say, "but by what we give." The young man carried those words with him wherever he went. One day, the production team contacted him again. They were planning to release a follow-up video, showing what had happened after the first one went viral. They wanted to feature not just the act of kindness, but also the friendship that had formed between him and the old man. The young man agreed, but only on one condition. He didn't want it to be about fame or attention. "Make it about kindness," he said. "Make it about how anyone can do something good, even in the smallest way." The crew spent a few days filming them together, walking in the park, visiting the tea stall, and helping others around the neighborhood. The old man and the young man laughed and joked naturally, forgetting the cameras were even there. It didn't feel like filming. It felt like living. When the final video was uploaded, it once again touched the hearts of millions. This time, people weren't just moved. They were inspired to take action. Stories began pouring in from across the country. A woman wrote that she started a community kitchen after watching their video. A group of students raised money to buy school supplies for children in need. A bus driver shared how he started carrying extra change to help passengers who were short on fare. The young man read these stories online and felt overwhelmed. It was like a wave of kindness spreading further than he ever imagined. But not everything was about praise and attention. There were quiet moments too. One evening, he and the old man sat by the riverside watching the sunset paint the sky orange. The old man sighed and said, "It's funny how life works. You helped me once, and now it feels like you've helped the whole world." The young man smiled gently. "Maybe the world just needed a reminder," he replied. The old man nodded. Yes, a reminder that being kind doesn't need a reason. As time went on, both their lives continued in peaceful rhythm. The young man kept working his job, still taking the bus, still stopping by the same tea stall for a cup of tea after work. The old man kept volunteering and spending time with his daughter. They met every weekend, sometimes for tea, sometimes just to walk and talk. One afternoon, the young man found a letter slipped under his door. It was from the old man. Inside it read, "If one day we don't meet again, I want you to remember this. You didn't just buy me a ticket that day. You gave me hope. And you reminded me that good hearts still exist in this busy world." The young man read it several times, feeling tears in his eyes. He folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his wallet. From then on, whenever he saw someone in need, he would think of that letter. He didn't hesitate to help, no matter how small the act was. He had learned that kindness wasn't about timing, attention, or reward. It was about doing what's right simply because you can. Months later, the young man was sitting at the bus terminal again, waiting for his ride. The same noise filled the air, the same rush of people moving from one place to another. But this time he noticed something new. A young woman in the line ahead of him paid for an old lady's ticket. The cashier smiled. The crowd watched quietly. The young man couldn't help but smile, realizing that the chain of kindness was still alive. Maybe that was the true power of one small act. It never really ended. It just kept finding its way from one heart to another. The day after the reunion, the young man woke up feeling different. There was a quiet peace in his heart, the kind that comes when you know you've done something that truly mattered. Life around him was still the same noisy streets, the same bus station full of rushing people. But something inside him had shifted. He looked at the world with new eyes, realizing how a small moment of kindness could change so much, not just for one person, but for many. When he stepped outside that morning, the air felt fresher. The sky was clear and the sunlight spread softly over the buildings. He decided to take a walk to the same bus terminal where everything had started. It had been only a few weeks, but it already felt like a lifetime ago. He wanted to see it again, not because of the cameras or the attention, but to remind himself that sometimes the smallest choices carry the biggest meaning. As he walked through the familiar area, memories came flooding back. The old man fumbling for coins, the impatience of the people in line, and the simple moment when he stepped forward and paid without a second thought. He smiled at how natural it had felt. Back then he hadn't thought much of it. It was just something that felt right in the moment. But now it felt like a turning point, a quiet lesson wrapped in an ordinary act. At the station, things were as busy as ever. People hurried to buy tickets, some arguing, others lost in their own thoughts. A mother tried to calm her crying child. A student with heavy bags searched for his ticket. Life was moving fast, just like always. The young man sat on a bench for a while, watching it all unfold. He thought about how everyone had their own battles, their own reasons to rush, and how a simple act of kindness could make that rush a little easier for someone. He looked around and noticed an elderly woman near the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she counted her coins. The situation felt strangely familiar. She looked confused, trying to make sense of the ticket prices. The young man stood up and walked toward her, speaking gently. "Do you need some help, ma'am?" She looked up, surprised but relieved. He helped her count the change and realized she was short by a small amount. Without hesitation, he paid the difference just like he had before. The woman's eyes softened and she gave a grateful smile. "Thank you, son," she said quietly. He nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. There were no cameras this time. No one watching or recording, no team hiding behind corners. Just two strangers sharing a small moment of humanity. It felt good. Better than any attention or praise ever could. As he stepped back, he thought about how much had changed since that first day. The video had gone viral. He had met the old man again, and people from all over the world had reached out with kind words. But in truth, none of that mattered as much as moments like this, quiet, unseen, and real. Kindness, he realized, wasn't about being noticed. It was about choosing to care even when no one's watching. Over the next few weeks, his life slowly returned to normal. The excitement around the viral video faded, but its message stayed alive. He started volunteering at a community center, helping distribute food to families in need. The experience gave him a deeper sense of purpose. He met people from all walks of life, some struggling, some lonely, some just needing someone to listen. Each encounter reminded him that kindness didn't always have to be big. Sometimes it was just about being present. The old man he had helped that day became a friend. They spoke often, sometimes meeting for tea. The old man shared stories from his past, about his younger days, his family, and the lessons life had taught him. He told the young man that the day at the bus station had restored his faith in people. "I thought the world had forgotten how to care," he said once, his voice trembling slightly. "But that day you reminded me there's still good left." The young man listened quietly, humbled. He never saw himself as special. To him it was just something anyone could do. But he realized that sometimes one simple act could give someone hope when they need it most. The old man's daughter, who had been ill, was now recovering well, and he often spoke about how that moment at the station had given him the strength to face those hard days. Months passed, and though life carried on, the story still touched hearts online. Schools shared it as an example of empathy. People sent messages saying it inspired them to help others. Even though the young man didn't seek fame, he felt grateful knowing that his small gesture had started something larger than he ever imagined. It had reminded people that humanity still existed in everyday life. One evening, he walked by a park where a group of children were playing. He heard one of them telling a friend, "My mom said we should always help people, like that man who paid for the old grandpa's bus ticket." The young man smiled quietly, realizing that kindness had rippled farther than he'd ever thought. It had become a story passed from one person to another, teaching compassion in its simplest form. He sat on a bench, watching the sunset paint the sky with warm colors. He thought about how often people chase big dreams or recognition, forgetting the beauty of small, real moments. That day at the station hadn't made him rich or famous. It had made him human in the truest sense. And that was enough. The air grew cooler as the night came in. He stood up to head home, walking through the streets lit with soft yellow lights. Along the way, he saw a street vendor packing up his stall. Some fruits had fallen on the ground and people walked by without noticing. The young man stopped, helped the vendor gather them, and smiled. The vendor thanked him, surprised. Again, it was nothing big, just another small moment unseen by the world but deeply human. As he walked away, he thought about how life gives everyone a chance to be kind every day. Sometimes it's through words, sometimes through action, sometimes through silence. It doesn't always need to be grand, it just needs to be genuine. That night, when he reached home, he sat quietly by the window, looking out at the stars. He remembered the old man's words from their last meeting. "You never know who's watching, but even if no one is, keep being kind." Those words stayed with him. He realized that cameras, applause, or recognition could come and go, but the feeling that comes from doing good lasts forever. The next morning, he woke up early and went back to his daily routine, ready to face another ordinary day. But now he carried a different kind of awareness, one that saw opportunities for kindness in every corner of life. Whether it was helping someone cross the road, listening to a friend, or sharing a smile with a stranger, he knew each moment mattered. And though no one else might ever record or post those acts, he understood something far more valuable. The real worth of kindness isn't measured in views or likes. It's measured in hearts touched, even silently. Sometimes the truest goodness happens when no one's there to see it, and that's what makes it pure. As he walked past the same bus terminal one last time, he paused for a moment, looking at the busy line of people and the ticket counter. He smiled softly to himself, then turned and continued walking. There were no cameras now, no spotlight, just life moving forward. But his heart was light, knowing that even the simplest act of compassion can echo quietly, changing more than we ever realize.